Good morning, National Action Network. Welcome to day 2 of the conference. How many are excited to be in the house today? We're excited to gear up for day 2 of our conference. We had an amazing day yesterday where we heard from some of our nation's leaders. We heard from the president, the attorney general, some of his cabinet members, and today we're excited to hear from more of his cabinet members. This conference is so important, as I say in the words of late Congressman Elijah Cummings. We're fighting for generations yet unborn. We understand at this moment that we're in, we're not just fighting for ourselves, but we're fighting for our children's and our children's children. Because when our children are looking in the history books, will they say that we stood on the right side of history? And in this past year, we have seen an unprecedented year with COVID-19. And now is the time for us to tackle the challenges that we are facing ahead. And it starts here because we are about the action, as we say. This is National Action Network. As Rev says, this is not the National Satisfaction Network, but we are all about the work. And we're super excited for day 2 of our conference. Today we will hear from some special guests and leaders. As I said yesterday, we heard from some others. Today we will hear from U.S. House of Representative Majority Whip James Clyburn from the great state of South Carolina. I know South Carolina's in the house. We also hear from my fellow Aggie HBCU alum, Michael Reagan, who is the administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency, and also the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and also the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And then after that, we will then follow a media panel. And at this time, I would now like to welcome Miss Rachel Norlinger to the. At this time, we will now hear from our plenary videos, as I said before, from some of our nation's leaders. So tune in and listen in. Thank you again.
I want to thank the National Action Network for inviting me to be a part of this year's annual meeting. But I most especially want to thank them for the honor bestowed upon me last year. A lot of people have been asking for the incentive to me to give the kind of endorsement of Joe Biden that I gave on the 26th of February 2020. And quite frankly, it was rooted in the breakfast, National Action Network's breakfast that was held 90 minutes before that endorsement. They established an award in the name of my late wife and decided I ought to be the first recipient of that award. And when I look back after receiving the award, Joe Biden walked into the room. All of that added to the emotions of the morning. And when I stood up around 9:30 that morning to endorse him, it was with the full knowledge that I had just experienced with him a very emotional evening, because Emily had told me about 4 months before she passed away that if the Democrats wanted to win in November 2020, we would do well to nominate Joe Biden. That's what we did, and this is where we are. And I want to thank the National Action Network, and most especially my good friend Reverend Al, and my longtime friend Nelson Rivers, not just for their friendship, but also for all that they do to help make America a better place for each and every one of us. The pursuit of a more perfect union is a pursuit we should not give up on, irrespective of what may be some more detours along the way. We'll get back on the main road and we'll get to where we need to be. I'm sure of it. And a lot of that will be due to the work of National Action Network. And thank you so much for letting me be a part of your efforts.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Regan, Administrator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I'm excited to be part of your historic 30th anniversary convention. Thank you to Reverend Sharpton and the entire National Action Network team for inviting me here today. I'd like to talk with you about an issue that's near and dear to my heart and to the entire Biden-Harris administration: environmental justice. For decades, communities of color, tribal and low-income communities have been on the front lines of pollution. They disproportionately feel the harmful effects of climate change. They suffer higher rates of heart and lung disease, and now COVID-19 too. We cannot allow these disparities to endanger the lives of Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and low-income people anymore. President Biden has pledged to marshal the full force of government to advance racial justice, civil rights, and equal opportunity. At EPA, we'll do everything in our power to address long-standing disparities and to ensure environmental justice underpins all of our work, from fighting climate change to protecting drinking water to cleaning up contaminated sites across the country. I'm also proud that the American Rescue Plan, which is providing relief for millions of Americans as we speak, recognizes EPA's essential role in closing the health disparity gap. It earmarks $50 million for state and local environmental justice programs. We're hard at work determining where those dollars will go the furthest in helping communities hit the hardest from COVID-19, the economic downturn, and environmental issues. I commit to folks like you who are doing the work on the ground that I will have an open-door policy to ensure EPA hears directly about the reality for environmental justice communities and that our broader agenda is responsive to that reality. Until every child has clean water to drink, clean air to breathe, and safe places to learn and play, our work must continue. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, and thanks to Reverend Al Sharpton and National Action Network for hosting this important convening. Reverend Sharpton, you've set an important example by getting the COVID vaccine, and I know your efforts have been critical in increasing awareness around testing, treatment, and recovery. Your leadership always makes a difference. As we celebrate 30 years of the National Action Network, we recognize the important role of this organization in protecting and advancing civil rights and educational opportunity. I'm particularly excited that you're putting young leaders at the forefront of the civil rights movement through your youth and college division. Ashley Sharpton and Tyleek McMillan, your work will empower generations of students to engage with their communities and influence policy. Thanks for leading this important work. I'm honored to join you at such a critical time in our nation's history. Right now, we're dealing with two traumas: a pandemic that has disproportionately impacted our Black and brown communities, and a long overdue racial reckoning that imposes additional trauma on these very same populations. Many of you may not know me or my story. My grandparents came from Puerto Rico to Meriden, Connecticut in search of a better life. I was born at the Yale Acres Housing Projects, attended public schools, and graduated from a state technical high school. Growing up, my parents built a vibrant community around me and my siblings. This community taught me to dream big and aim high, and they helped me succeed both in and out of school, supporting me on my educational journey and ultimately in attaining the position I'm honored to hold today. All our students, particularly our Black and brown students, need supportive communities like these, perhaps now more than ever before. The pandemic has taken a disproportionate toll on people of color. Black Americans have a death rate nearly twice that of white Americans. For Latinos, the numbers are even higher. These health disparities are compounded by unacceptable inequities that have persisted for generations. We know, for example, that schools with 90% or more students of color spend $733 less per student per year than schools with 90% or more white students. This means less access to engaging and high-quality learning opportunities after school and summer enrichment. It means our educators are paid less and lack additional supports. And it also means 3 million students attend school with a police officer but no nurse. 14 million attend school with a police presence but without an on-staff counselor, nurse, psychologist, or social worker. We cannot allow these historic gaps to grow wider. This administration will use every tool at its disposal to advance educational equity in student opportunity and outcomes. This begins with meeting the President's goal of safely reopening K-8 schools. One of our best levers for equity is in-person learning. This has been the top priority of my department, and we're doing everything we can to make it happen. Last month, we got our first data back on school reopening efforts. We learned that while many schools are on the path to reopening for in-person learning, access to classroom instruction still remains unequal. More Black, Latino, and Asian students learned remotely over the previous year compared to their white peers. Some students and families have chosen to stay remote this year, carefully weighing academic factors with health risks and emotional well-being. As a parent of two, I recognize the anxiety that surrounds these decisions and that there are no easy choices. At the same time, we want to be sure students and families have the support they need to make informed decisions and the resources to safely return to in-person learning should they choose to do so. Under my leadership, the Department of Education will take a problem-solving, solutions-oriented approach to working with schools, educators, and families to get students back in the classroom full-time. For instance, we've released practical guidance for schools and communities to support student and staff well-being, increase investments in student success, and facilitate robust stakeholder engagement. We've also prioritized sharing best practices through a national Safe School Reopening Summit and a Safer Schools and Campuses Best Practices Clearinghouse. Importantly, the American Rescue Plan provides $130 billion to not only reopen K-12 schools safely, but also to address the social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs of students and staff. The plan includes $800 million to support the specific needs of students experiencing homelessness. The American Rescue Plan invests in early childhood education and in higher education, including historically Black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions. The legislation also includes at least $18 billion in emergency grants directly to students so they can cover basic expenses and needs during this moment of financial instability. In addition to addressing the impact of COVID-19 on students and educators and accelerating recovery, this administration will promote equity in students' access to high-quality schools, positive school climates, and critical opportunities such as coursework that includes the arts and sciences. Access to strong teachers and school leaders must be among these supports, including teachers who look like the students they serve. As a Latino educator myself, I know firsthand how important it is that students see themselves in what they learn and who they learn from. Research tells us that all students benefit from learning with diverse peers and from diverse educators. Our Black and Hispanic teachers are critical role models, showing students what's possible when we maintain high expectations and engage them in challenging and culturally relevant curriculum. As an administrator in Meriden, my team and I undertook ambitious efforts to grow a diverse teacher workforce and learned some shareable lessons along the way. As we move forward together, collaboration will be critical at every level. That's why the President will invest in strategic partnerships that benefit communities of color, including expanding the community schools model. Entire communities benefit when schools open their doors to parents, families, and neighbors seeking academic, health, and social support. From expanding learning time for students to health resource fairs, community schools bring together local partners in unprecedented ways. And across the country, these coalitions are setting and achieving community-specific goals like kindergarten readiness, access to vision, health, and dental care, and improved graduation rates. Together, we can think through new ways and innovative ways to approach issues like safe neighborhoods and gun violence. We can provide safe spaces for students to learn after school in order to close achievement gaps and invest in our communities. To truly advance excellence in education, we must be vigilant about advancing opportunities for all students. That means educating students, families, and schools about discrimination in education, preventing violations, and enforcing civil rights laws. Our Office of Civil Rights, or OCR, works toward these and other goals, including the civil rights data collection. OCR will continue to work alongside NAN and other civil rights organizations to solicit critical feedback that will enhance the civil rights data collection. We look forward to our sustained collaboration in the upcoming year. Equal access to education is at the heart of OCR's mission, but sexual harassment and violence threaten this access for students of all ages. President Biden will ensure that all students are guaranteed an educational environment free from discrimination on the basis of gender, including appropriate supports for students who have experienced sex discrimination. Moving forward, we'll invest in a whole-of-government approach to improving outcomes for our students and families. We'll also remove silos in education, share our breakthroughs and successes, and cultivate schools and colleges as hubs of innovation. This means reimagining what education looks like in this country. Returning back to the status quo is not acceptable. Our students deserve our very best efforts, our most collaborative thinking, and our deepest belief in their abilities. In the days ahead, I hope NAN's members will help to inform school staff and childcare workers that they are priority recipients for the vaccine and help them sign up in their areas. And recognizing that COVID-19 brought educational inequities to the forefront, I hope you'll help your state and local leaders identify the educational needs of the students in your school and create comprehensive plans to help all students succeed. Together, we reaffirm our collective responsibility to end discrimination in all of its forms and to emerge a more just and equitable America. Thank you again for your commitment to the students, families, and communities you serve. I look forward to our continued work together.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you to Congressman Clyburn and Secretary Cardona for their statements. Let me go right into the media panel. Yesterday, we started with the President of the United States. Today, we're starting with our media panel. And let me introduce each of the media panelists. Media, extremely important in terms of how public opinion is shaped in this country, and National Action Network and all of you. We had record numbers following virtually yesterday. We'll give them numbers out throughout the day. But it is extremely important, this panel, that we deal with how public awareness is and is not handled in a fair way that is inclusive. As we are now in the middle, we just finished our national board meeting, as we find ourselves in the middle of being on the front line of both the George Floyd case and the Wright case, I'll be doing the eulogy at Wright's funeral. National Action Network is paying for that as well this week. One of the things that Eric Garner's mother's here today and other mothers, Trayvon's mother and others, we have paid for funeral services for everyone from Eric Garner to George Floyd to others. And even when they get settlements, we never ask for reimbursement because this is what we do. And we never had a GoFundMe page, never raised money. We drew it out of our budget because we do not want our families to have to run around and worry about that. So I just want our chapter leaders around to understand nobody buys insurance in case a police kills my son. So we take that off the table at first. We'll handle that. And we don't need athletes and others, let them give something to the kids. We take care of that, and I just want people to know that. And when they get a $1 trillion settlement, we don't ask for money back. That's for the family. They need that. So I just want to make that clear. We have on the panel today, and let me give credit to Rachel Nordlinger, who's worked with us for the last 20-something years. Kurt Bardella is on the panel. He's a contributor to the Los Angeles Times and USA Today. He served as spokesperson and senior advisor for Republicans on the House Oversight and Reform Committee. In 2016, Kurt left the Republican Party and joined the Democratic Party. He is now a contributor to MSNBC and NBC News think tank. Glad to have him with us. Charles Blow is a New York Times op-ed columnist, and he has led the Times to countless awards covering politics, public opinion, and social justice. Our last convention in 2019, he received National Action Network's Media Award for his coverage of crucial issues, none that has not stopped. He continues every Monday. I read him faithfully, and to show you his respect for the organization, he actually put on a tie today. He doesn't do that for everybody. Y'all need to know that. Dr. Benjamin Chavis is president and CEO of NNPA, National Newspaper Publishers Association. Dr. Chavis is an entrepreneur, global business leader, educator, civil rights leader, syndicated columnist, and author. He's worked with NAN on several key initiatives down through the years, a legendary civil rights leader, one of the Wilmington 10. He is certainly in the Hall of Fame of civil rights leaders, and we're glad and honored that we have Dr. Chavis with us. Michelle McGee is the CEO of Ebony Magazine, the iconic black media institution. She's an innovator, author, and award-winning leader, and she's now leading Ebony and Jet, bringing it back big time. She's worked for some of the top media platforms, including A&E, CNN, the History Channel, and BET, where she created and ran the first and only network for black women, BET Her. And we're glad to have her. Ira Rosen is a best-selling author. He's the former senior producer of CBS News 60 Minutes. He produced some of the most groundbreaking political stories for 60 Minutes. He's won 24 National Emmy Awards, 24, placing him in the top 10 of all-time Emmy Awards winners in broadcasting. And he produced one of these 2 or 3 profiles on me in 60 Minutes. It was fair. No, he was fair to me. April Ryan is the White House correspondent and Washington, D.C. bureau chief for the Griot. She has covered the White House for 24 years and is an award-winning author. She has reported from the front lines as one of the few black female White House correspondents, and God knows we all remember her and Trump. It's like Ali Frazier fights. April Ryan.
Love it.
Let's go Mara Scaravamp. I always mess up your name. Is the host of Run Tell, this podcast, and a correspondent for Dr. Oz show. She's a multiple Emmy Award-winning journalist and was one of the early pioneers in digital broadcasting. Myra has covered some of the biggest news stories of the last decade, and she's a senior investigative correspondent for the Dr. Oz Show and a longtime friend of National Action Network. Kat Stafford is national investigative race writer for Associated Press. Before joining AP, she was an investigative reporter for Detroit, Michigan, where her reporting prompted city legislation, policy changes, congressional reviews, and federal and state investigations. And last but not least, Cheryl Wills, no stranger to those of us in New York and Nan. She's the host of In Focus with Cheryl Wills on New York One Spectrum, and she is nationally recognized award-winning television personality for Spectrum News. Cheryl is the author of a series of books about her great-grandparents who were former slaves, and she is certainly no stranger to National Action Network. The moderator is my little brother and colleague at MSNBC, Kendis Gibson, is an anchor for MSNBC's 6 to 8 a.m. weekend news programming. I spend more time on the elliptical Saturday morning, Sunday morning watching Kendis tell me what I missed while I was asleep. Before MSNBC, he spent 5 years as anchor on overnight newscasts for ABC News. Let me turn this over to Kendis Gibson.
Rev, thank you. Thank you, guys. And I should mention, Reverend, thank you for the National Action Network and so many others for having us and putting together this amazing panel. And no pressure. You said yesterday you started out with the president, and now you're starting out with us. All right, cool. Wasn't stressing it at all until then. Should mention my good friend, Maris Chiavocampo. It took me years to be able to pronounce that last name.
You nailed it.
And the good thing is the Reverend married you, so he made you get rid of that last name. He made you Mrs. Porter.
I got her new name. I got her new name in the marriage.
Exactly. Yes,
exactly.
Yes, he conducted those renewal vows, so he should just call me Mrs. Porter.
Exactly. So, hey, Mrs. Porter, and hey, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. Let's get started because we have so many people in an all-star group here. You know, when we discussed this whole panel about a week ago, we did not know about Karen Nazario. We did not know about Dante Wright, and there are probably countless others. It's amazing the times that we live in right now. Cheryl, I want to start with you because you're there on a day-to-day basis, and good to see you, my friend. How important is it to have a Black voice nowadays in the newsroom? Are you actively there saying, oh, I just saw this video of Karen Nazario, we need to get it into our newscast? Or are there managers now that are saying, oh yeah, this is important? Or do you still have to advocate at this point?
Did you say Cheryl?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Kendis. Hello, National Action Network family. It's an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues. You know what? We have come a long way, and I'm proud to say that Spectrum News has come a long way. And after 30 years with New York One, I no longer have to advocate like I say would have 20 years ago. I feel that they are listening much better now based on all of the tragedies that have been in our face. And that's why I think, Kendis, it's so important for people of color to be in positions of responsibility in the newsroom, because we hold our colleagues' feet to the fire. So when all of these horrific stories involving police shooting unarmed Black men and women, it's not an argument, not on my turf anymore. And I'm very proud of that. And I'd like to think I had a lot to do with that.
Yes, I'm sure you did. I mean, you've been in this business for a long time, have great experience, and we've all been fighting this fight. Ira, you've been in this business as well for a long time. Do you feel as if, from when you started out, that, say, getting a video like the Virginia and Nazario video would have been difficult 2 decades ago to get it on TV and get it the attention that it needs?
No, I think it definitely would have gotten the attention. The key is not to feel that you've done a story and you could move away from it. I think what's important now is that news organizations need to own a story. So if you're going to do a story about what's happening inside the Black community, police brutality, you need to do it continuously. When I was at 60 Minutes, for example, we did a story on the opiate epidemic, and we did 5 separate stories, which resulted in a lot of policy changes, resulted in people getting fired, resulted in major lawsuits against the opiate industry. We also did stories where we got people out of jail, and we stayed on those stories. The key is to stay on a story and not feel that if you dip your toe into a story, you could leave it.
So, Kat, how do we exactly stay on this issue? It feels as if we can't leave it. There are so many different incidents on any daily basis that's coming up. How do we give the Dante Wrights the attention that they need come next week when there's something else that happens?
Well, I think honestly, first, the real key to all of this is being deeply embedded and rooted in the communities that we are tasked with covering. And I talk often that journalists need to really think about how we should be reporting for communities as opposed to reporting on communities. And there is definitely a difference. When you have these relationships that are built with the activists on the ground, when you have these relationships that are built with trusted community members, they are going to come to you and trust you with the narrative and trust you to share their stories in a way that is meaningful, right? So I think that we really need to, as an industry, go back to the very basics of learning the communities that we're supposed to be covering, because there's a lot of community mistrust right now that is directed toward the media. I think that we have made significant gains in terms of the ways in which we are covering police violence, but I'm also still hearing from people on the ground that they want to see the media represented in their communities more outside of when the atrocities happen, outside of COVID-19. They want to see their full experiences told in a way that they haven't before. And I just want to point out, 50 years later, after the Kerner Commission report, we are still grappling with the same incidents, the same mistakes. So I think it's time for us to really take on some soul searching and figure out what we're doing wrong and how to really repair these relationships.
Relationships between the community or in what we're reporting?
Relationships with the communities, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a story, right? We have to realize that we are reporting on folks' lives.
That indeed. This is why I'm a big fan of Sarah Seidner, and I'm sure you guys are as well. Whenever you see her on TV, you feel as if you know that she is, she empathizes with those communities that she's reporting on. And part of that as well is because we've lived it. We've all had these experiences. We've all been pulled over or whatever, and we all have kids that we are fearful for. April last year, when the Floyd protests took place, I know this firsthand that there are many TV networks that obviously they empathize and they reached out to their employees, but they also encourage that their employees do not take part in some of the protests because they felt as if it could be turned into something political. It was a political year. If you were told that, what would you have done?
Well, I'm from the old school, I guess you would say. I don't participate in protesting, but I believe my pen speaks volumes. I believe my voice speaks volumes. People understand that there is a relationship with Black media and the community, because we were beating the drum when other media was not talking about our issues. And I take what I do seriously. I am not an activist, but I do report and chronicle and curate, I guess you would say to a certain extent, news about our community, all sides of the spectrum. That is important. Now, that's journalistically. Behind the scenes, at my home where I am now, I'm very opinionated. I am a Black woman from Black parents, and I'm 5 generations removed from the last known slave in my family. But it is incumbent upon me to tell the story, to dig deep from the highest offices in the land to the lowest spaces and places in the land to get the story right. So I can put it on the table for you to decide if it's time for me to protest, if it's time for me to hold tight and wait. It's not mine to tell people what to do. It's mine to give them what is going on so they can make a decision. That's the way I look at it.
Charles, let me have you pick up on that, if you don't mind. Where does the line between being a Black person and a journalist and somebody who wants to be a protester physically out there in the streets versus using the power of the pen, as April pointed out?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question exactly, other than to say that, but for me, writing is an action first. And to echo what April said about I'm not an activist. In fact, you have to keep some distance in journalism between what's happening and what you're reporting on and what you're chronicling and what and yourself. I often think about war correspondents. You see horrific things than I see, but to maintain some space between what they are seeing and what they are doing as their job in order to get the report back. But I will say one other thing, that not part of the question you asked me, but was asked a little bit earlier about representation in newsrooms. I don't even think it's enough, not numerically in terms of how many people there are. I don't think that Black faces are enough. I think that we all have to reevaluate news as it positions itself now in relationship to Black communities, and Black people, Black reporters are participating in things that are detrimental to our community. We are showing images of Black people being killed as wallpaper. And I always tell people, from a news perspective, if you had footage of a woman being raped, would you show it? And if you did show it, would you show it once, or would you show it repeatedly as a motif behind which people sit or stand and tell the news? Because that is precisely what we are doing with the images of Black people dying. And it is even more severe than rape because it is the end of a life. And we participate in that as well. We participate in the process of going to scenes where people protest only when it is spectacle. If 300 people sit down with candles in a park, we're not there. If 300 people start to throw bottles, we are. We are teaching the community that the only thing that gets the cameras rolling is to create spectacle, and then we admonish them for the spectacle. That is a problem with news generally, and I see a lot of Black news reporters assigned to those stories and in front of those cameras and participating in the gawking at spectacle. So I think that it is important to have Black people be reporters and have Black voices at the table, but I do not believe that that is enough to deal with what is problematic about news coverage and Black communities.
Can I jump in?
Go ahead. Who is that?
Because
Sure.
Charles, of course, brings up a problem that any 24-hour cable news network like mine deals with all the time. And Charles, I really want your expertise on this. We have a problem with that. And we, like with the recent death of Mr. Dante Wright, we're still showing it. But if we stop showing it, we get criticized. And if we show it, we get criticized. And on one hand, we need to show it. We need to put this in the face of New Yorkers, of Americans, to let them see what's happening. But when we pull back and say, okay, this is too graphic, we're not going to show this anymore, only in context of, say, the upcoming trial, then people criticize us, why aren't you showing it? So in a way, we are in a no-win situation. How would you respond to that?
Doesn't it desensitize us to it? If we're I had this argument as well during the whole Floyd, the initial weeks after Floyd's death, where I personally couldn't watch the video anymore. And I kept wondering, if George Floyd was white and died that way, would we be playing that video just as much?
Right. It's.
I think you have to look at it in terms of obscenity.
Uh-huh.
If your policy at your network is never to show child pornography when that becomes a news story, Is that more obscene than someone being killed on camera? If your policy would be never to show a sexual assault, is that more obscene than someone being killed on camera? There is a way to make video available without exploitation of video on film. There are ways to cut away at the moment that the action occurs and say that it is available if you want, if you must see it, it is available on our website, but we choose not to make pornography of Black death.
Mara, you've been in the newsroom. Let me get you to weigh in.
Yeah, I think that what Charles is saying is absolutely right. And I think that part of the problem is that we've all kind of come to accept Black people as victims. And so this fits into society's accepted narrative of Black people being oppressed, of Black people and being having violence inflicted upon them. And so I think because of that, especially when you have white managers in the newsroom, it doesn't even occur to them that this is not something that should be seen, because this country has been looking at those images as long as this country has existed. Those photos of lynchings have been sent around the country to family members. You know, for decades ago, that was the version of the videos that we're seeing today. This is baked into Americana. And so I think it doesn't even occur to a lot of people to say, wait a minute, should we be showing this? And really with the George Floyd video, this was the first time that I ever saw media organizations realize that they should not be playing it on a loop as B-roll and pulling back. I have not seen that video played on mainstream news organizations. You see it pop up in the internet and, you know, different social media feeds. I have not seen news organizations use it since roughly around the time it happened until now, until the trial. And when the trial started, I feel like they felt justified in using it because it was part of the evidence, it was part of the courtroom conversation, and there's an argument to be had that perhaps that's the case. So I felt like that was the first time they got it. But prior to that, showing these videos and using them as B-roll was just general practice. And so that's why it's so important. You know, we see a lot of Black faces in front of the camera right now, and that's a really good development. But that's not the most important development. The most important development is more of these faces behind the scenes. These are the puppet masters who are pulling the strings. They're deciding what gets covered and how it gets covered. That's what's really important. We are seeing some of that. You know, ABC News just named the first Black woman as president of the news division ever. So that is to be applauded. That's an amazing move. We all want her to succeed. We wish her well. That is a great thing. We need a lot more of that, because otherwise it's just window dressing. If you just have a bunch of reporters in front of the camera and white people pulling the strings.
Candace, can I just jump on the back of that, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that, and don't forget that it's all tied to ratings, right? And me coming from being a sales executive at CNN into BET, we are sitting around a table with no other Black executives saying that story's not appropriate. I don't care how much money this network needs to make. And if you don't have someone through the entire food chain, there are breaks in the link. There is no alignment. And where there is no alignment, God does not show up, and there is no conscience. So I don't want anyone watching this forget, this is a money game, people. This is about driving ratings. This is about people buying their homes in the Hamptons that don't look like us. Don't let me start preaching Dr. Benjamin, but that's what it is. It's a money game, and we have these conversations all day long.
Well, and let me get to the.
I'm going to jump in also when you get a chance, Candace.
Oh, go ahead, Doc.
First of all, I want to thank Charles Blow for opening this up, because this is the heart of the matter. But I do want to give a shout out to Jet and Ebony. We would not know who Emmett Till was. We would not know about Ms. Mobley if it hadn't been for that, putting that terrible, battered image on the cover of Jet magazine. It was riveting. This is in the 1950s. Here we are now in 2021. So the exposure of black victimization just didn't happen around George Floyd. It is part of the American tradition. The thing that we need to have balance is, that's why the January the 6th, when all of the media kept showing white people wilding out, white people going crazy, white people attacking the Capitol over and over and over again. That wasn't pornography. That was exposing the depth of white supremacy, the depth of the rage that white people have because of the change in demographics in America. The reason why we now have a few more Black people in media position where they're making decisions is because the demographics are changing. The Children's Defense Fund just reported this week that the first time in American history, the majority of the population of under 18 are people of color, children of color. We don't have to wait to 2050 or 2040. It's happening now. And a lot of this resentment, the media has to, I think, bring balance. I think we need to show the victimizer, not just the victims, more, to show their inhumanity, to show their racism, to show their rage and anger, their insecurity. I think the media does not do a balanced job right now. And I think we have to have more than Black people talk about that Black Lives Matter. We need everybody to say that Black Lives Matter.
And Dr. Chavis, I agree. But I also want to get Kurt to weigh in because we've seen Asian victimization on display, especially this year. Kurt, is it, in your case, do you find that it's important, and for anybody, it doesn't have to be Kurt, but that it's important to show some of those attacks as well? Does it kind of diminish the life of so many of these people who are just seen out there being victimized?
You know, for the Asian American kid, this is the first time in my lifetime that any issue about Asian Americans has been part of the national conversation on race relations and hate crimes in America. And for us, it's kind of sickening that it's taken video after video after video of watching primarily elderly Asian Americans getting assaulted in our streets for that conversation to even happen. I think one of the important things in this conversation about representation, I don't want to see Black or Asian or Hispanic faces when there's a Black, Asian, Hispanic crime going on. I want to see us up there talking about all of the issues all of the time, because all of the issues that go on that are discussed throughout our country, whether it's education, whether it's the economy, whether it's criminal justice, whether it's reforms, healthcare, it affects all of us. And we should have an equal say at the table in discussing those things. And it shouldn't take a trial or an assault or some horrific scene to see a parade of communities of color on television. And I think that's where the news can also do a better job. You know, I don't want to see just, you know, whether it's Katie Fang, the legal analyst on MSNBC, who, or Richard Louie, one of the anchors. You know, I've joked about this with Richard. I hadn't seen him on TV that much in the last year. And then all of a sudden, crimes against Asian Americans are going on, and Richard is all over the place, which is great. It's important to have that voice at the table, of course. But all of us have something important and meaningful to contribute to the broader conversations going on every single day outside of just things that are happening specifically in our community. And that's an area that I think that the media needs to do a better job of.
Can I completely agree with you.
Can I chime in, please, on that?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I am very upset about how, when there is a crescendo moment, that mainstream media, because we need to basically specify what media we're talking about, mainstream media or we're talking about Black media, because there is a big difference. Black media, just like Dr. Chavis said with Ebony and Jet, they were beating the drum. They showed us the ugly truth of what happened in Money, Mississippi. They showed us the ugly truth of what's been happening in our lives. Black media has been beating the drum since the inception, since way before Ida B. Wells. We were the griots back in Africa talking about it. And when there is a crescendo moment, mainstream media jumps in and then asks the Black reporter, well, is this a thing? Yes, it's been a thing for a long time. You're just finding out about it. So let's look there. And Black media, let's give Black media its props. But then let's talk about mainstream media. Call it out. It's incumbent upon those who are in those newsrooms, who are in leadership, to say we need to do more. As you had a president a few months ago who did not like to deal with issues of a community that's hurting with the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. And now you have a president that's talking about equity. It's like the end thing. It needs to be the end thing all the time. This is a community, the Black, the brown, the Asian community now, that's in the scope of being a community, well, the Black and brown community, the highest numbers of negatives in almost every category. And now our Asian brothers and sisters are feeling the hate. It's not in vogue. It's life. It's humanity. And it's not about money. It's about people. At the end of the day, that's the way I see it.
Can I just make another question, which is, we've talked a little bit about video, but there's also hate speech. Do you repeat hate speech? I know at one of the networks, there was a strong discussion about whether to repeat President Trump's Chinese virus comments and whether to put that on a loop and to sort of repeat it as a way of addressing the issue. And in the end, they decided to show it to make a point. But I think it's a valid question to ask whether you could summarize it without showing it.
Dr. Chavis, do you mind weighing in on that?
Yes, I think, first of all, this is a great discussion. We thank Reverend Al Sharpton for having this media panel. Media, we not only have a responsibility to report the truth, but as April Ryan said, the Black press, we're an advocate also of freedom, justice, and equality. So it's not only what we report, it's how we report it. So I was right. I think that we have to have some sense of accountability to our audience, accountability to society in which we are trying to also encourage to transform. America still has a problem with systemic racism. And every time we try to ignore it, it comes back to bite all of us. And I think that the Black press is trusted. Black-owned media is trusted because we've earned that trust over the years by not getting caught up in what I would call sensationalism, but also dealing with the real reality of the pain and suffering that too many of our people, when I say our people, I'm talking all communities of color, are now experiencing. But I'm hopeful that we not only have this discussion, that it will reflect what we will do after this show, Candace, after Reverend Sharpton's convention. I think we all realize all of us have work to do, whether we're in mainstream media or Black media. We all have work to do to kind of keep pushing the envelope toward a better, more perfect union.
Let me get to diversity behind.
Real quick, what IRS asked about, which was the use of the President Trump's racist terminology regarding the coronavirus. I think that the first time he says it might be a reportable event because it's racist and it's the President of the United States. Every time after that, there is no need at all to rerun that phrase, China virus, Kung flu, on a loop. All any anchor, any reporter would have to say is the president used a racist term to describe the coronavirus, and that's it.
And I think a lot of us do say that, fight that fight on any given basis. I want to talk about diversity because, as Mara mentioned, there have been a number of changes. We have the first Black president of a network joining ABC News. MSNBC has its first Black female president as well. Cesar Conde is head of NBC News. There's been a lot that has changed in the last 9 or 10 months. But Michelle, you know corporations and you know how this stuff works. A lot of these folks will encounter hostility and even if there's inclusivity, it's a tough fight for many of these folks behind the scenes.
So if they have any notion like I have, one of the joys of me having the honor to usher Ebony and Jet. And every time I say those words, I say it with so much pride because I know what Mr. Johnson was trying to do in 1945 when he allowed us to see an image of ourselves for the first time on the cover of a magazine. I mean, there's just so much pride. They better hire everybody they can that's talented, that looks like we have an opportunity. Me, right? Every journalist I hire can look like me, can have a voice, can be Black, can be bold, can be unapologetic. And I'm going to tell you something right now. That is my number one priority. And they better do the same thing because I've worked at news networks and they do have the power to make sure that they don't believe the Kool-Aid that there's only room for one, right? That's what they tell us. That's what they make us think. You made it, do the right thing. And then if we hire somebody that looks like us and they didn't do a great job, no, it's not. If I hire someone white, Black, if they're not good, that's not on me. They didn't do good. So we got to get out that mindset that it's not, this is business. We got to fill that pipeline and we have to fill it quickly so that other people can usher in this sentiment and then they can begin to build an organization that looks different. It's really the only way.
Mara, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I do. I have very strong feelings about this because here's the problem and here's what I fear, that a lot of opportunity is being given right now to Black journalists, particularly behind the scenes, which is where I feel it's most important. My fear is that power never gives up anything willingly and without a fight. And that they're doing this because they're aware of what the climate is. And as soon as the winds shift and we start looking at something else or focusing on something else, they're going to go back to the bad old days and to business as usual. And they're going to use the excuse of, well, we tried and it didn't work because this reason and it didn't work because of that reason and we tried. How many white men are put in positions and fail and then are succeeded by another white man? They don't say, oh, well, we tried a white man and it didn't work, so we're never doing that again. They say, oh, we tried this white man, he didn't work, so now let's find the next best person for the job. And so that's the mentality that needs to change. It's not that, oh, well, we tried a black president and we didn't hit the metrics that we were hoping to hit, so we're not going to do that again. No, it's keeping that door open. This cannot be a blip in time. This cannot be a trend. This has to be a permanent shift and change in the industry. We have to demand it. Now that we're in the door, we got to take it off the hinges. We got to keep that door open.
Also, I have to have a ladder for other folks to come up. Go ahead.
Quick point. One of the things that I'm concerned about are the younger journalists that have either just entered the industry or are thinking about getting into this industry. And I think that, yes, while representation, of course, is important, but I'm paying attention to where are these folks being placed in the newsroom. And too often I see us only being able to get into breaking news roles. As a board member of the Investigative Reporters and Editors organization, I know that many, if not most, of the investigative teams of most newsrooms in this country are still majority white. So while, yes, there have been gains that have been made, but we also know that some of these higher profile beats that carry more responsibilities and that have actual ability to impact communities, they are still overwhelmingly white. And I just think that enough conversations are not happening to make sure that change is being done there. And I just also want to note that I'm also concerned about the mental health of Black journalists right now. We are still in the midst of covering the intersection of this pandemic, its fallout, and the racial justice movement, and people are tired. People are burned out, and we are seeing people exit this industry. So I think newsroom leaders need to pay attention to what their employees are saying and provide them with the proper supports to support their mental health right now.
Do y'all feel as if organizations are helping enough when it comes to that? Yes, we're watching on a daily basis, Black lives, brown lives, so many people of color victimized and reporting on it. One of the toughest parts for me when I covered 9/11 was I used to be a reporter that I could go out on a story, and Cheryl, you know this, you go out on a story, you leave the scene, yes, you empathize, but you're not living it. 9/11, you're smelling the burning bodies, you're living in the city, you're surrounded by the stress. I feel as if we're facing a similar situation right now where we're out there, we're reporting it, we're coming home, we're part of it still. Do you feel as if organizations recognize that and that we're getting the proper help?
I'm so
Cheryl?
glad you brought this up, Candace, because yes, I can tell you personally, I am completely burned out. And 9/11, you and I were both there. That was a situation, especially as a native New Yorker, where you could not separate yourself from that. You know, if you're a New Yorker, if you grew up as a kid, you went in those Twin Towers on a field trip. So to see them come down before your very eyes was completely traumatic. And here we are with the pandemic. I've worked, I bet I speak for the entire panel when I say I've never worked harder in my life, even though I'm at home. I don't know how that happened. Even in my slippers, I'm burned out. Not sure how that dynamic came to be, but here we are. And then when George Floyd, that tragedy happened, we were doing like this double drama of this horrific incident playing out on national television while being secluded at home, usually by ourselves, and having to navigate both of these. And I don't think most newsrooms have been sensitive to how we as journalists have handled this personally. We did a whole hour special on the George Floyd incident, and I was screaming because it was just so overwhelming on so many levels.
You know, we're not supposed to, as reporters, we're not supposed to say that we have any kind of issues. We're supposed to do the job and keep our mouths quiet and be behind the scenes, not be seen and scribe and write the story. But the problem is I've been talking to more and more reporters right now, Asian, Latinx, and Black, who are African American, who are saying they are now seeking mental health care, therapy, and it's real. I mean, you've got reporters now who are out on the field crying because they're watching COVID deaths. They're being attacked almost on TV by people who are protesting, having a can of soup, claiming they're using it for their family or telling them to get away. You've got reporters who at the White House who were berated by the President of the United States and who had minions who wanted to go out and kill us. Hello. Mm-hmm. Therapy, and it's unfortunate. A lot of the companies, particularly minority owned, they don't understand this dynamic. It's about putting the story out. But the problem is this is a serious issue. We are now under attack. We're facing more situations. I mean, you see people who were in Beirut and in Afghanistan, they're getting combat pay or hazard pay when they go. It is getting to that point now for us, not just hazard pay, but mental health care. Because, when I was going through school, this was not on the agenda. When I studied for this, and if I had my druthers, if I look back again, if I know what I knew now, I don't know if I would have done it because it's taken a toll. And yes, and I will say this, I am in therapy and I'm healing, thank God. But this is a moment that reporters need to take a woosah moment. It's real.
Candace, there's a conversation that.
Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, I just want to share that there's a conversation that I have with reporters. We very often. This is a question that I ask a lot of people because I'm always curious. Do you watch these videos? Because people feel they have to watch them for work, especially if they're covering them. How can you report on something if you haven't seen, the most basic evidence at the core of the story? And there is a lot of debate where a lot of reporters have said to me, I can't watch them anymore. I can't do it anymore. The toll is too high. And so even when it's your job to cover them, it becomes too much to have to see it over and over and over again. So a lot of people have just opted out of the most traumatic aspects of covering these issues.
Yeah, understandably.
I have the privilege of having the ability, even the obligation to share how I'm feeling because I write opinion. But I do believe, I've been at the New York Times. I asked my mother when I interned at the New York Times. I think I came there in May, which would mean 30 years ago next month. I have worked at the New York Times for 25 of the last.
Got that good black.
Years. 25 of the last 30 years. And I do believe it is important sometimes to create space between you and stories. I mean, I like I said, I hold up war correspondents and how they're able to do this and remain sane and functioning and professional. I remember during 9/11 when that happened in the New York Times, I was a manager in the newsroom at the time, and they arranged for everyone to go to the site because, as Mar said, how can you report on it if you didn't see it? I didn't go, and I still have never gone to Ground Zero. First of all, I think it is sacred ground, and I don't see how people are walking around down there and all those people died there. It's it's a graveyard, and for the family, then it should be. I don't know, it's just my feeling personally. But secondly, I just didn't want to be overwhelmed by it. And that was the only way that I could figure out to be able to continue to do my job and to report for the citizens of New York what was happening in their city, what was the threat, had it passed, what was the impact, and how could I do that sanely and protect myself emotionally. I think that we all as reporters owe it to ourselves to make those calculations and to protect ourselves because this story, whatever the story of the moment, is not the last story you're going to do. You have to protect yourself as a voice and a vehicle for all the future stories that you're going to have to do.
So Candace, can I jump in? Candace, listen, I agree with what everybody is saying. I just want to remind us that the trauma that we face as reporters, as journalists, reflects the trauma that the communities in which we serve and we report also is facing. So we're not isolated from that trauma. But I do want to remind us that there's something called resilience. we're going to make it through this storm. We're going to make it through. This is not the first lynchings, public lynchings that we've witnessed. We may cover it differently. But I just want to say that I'm very impressed. And actually, I want to salute this new generation of young journalists I see coming up who are out there not only raising their cameras, raising their pens, but also raising their fists. They're becoming a challenge to the system of, keep in mind, media is not devoid of white supremacy either. So we got a struggle with mainstream media. We got to make sure that the black press is sustainable. But I don't want us to end this panel on a note of that we're being overwhelmed. I think that it reflects a serious change that's got to happen in America. And I think the media, and I don't think the media is going to do it by itself, but I think we have our role to play. And that's why I think this discussion is therapeutic.
Absolutely. And Dr. Travis, we have like 10 minutes left, but I do want to get all of y'all to weigh in on something that April kind of picked up on, because we all talk to students all the time, journalism students, and I'll get the question of whether they want to get into this business, whether they should, and we all pause. So I want to get everybody to weigh in really quickly here on this. What do you tell a journalism student, Dr. Travis first, who wants to get in this business?
I remind them that freedom is a constant struggle. I remind them when they get into the business, it's going to be a struggle, and no matter how how many awards you may win, or how you get to be the editor-in-chief, it's still going to be a struggle. But James Baldwin said something to me that I just want to repeat, that I tell young people. The pen is mightier than the sword. It's not only what we write, but it's how we write it. We want people to hear us, see us, but at the end of the day, we want people to feel what we're writing.
I know you long form, but let me get you to do short form here.
Can I just pick up on that, because it's a great point, which is the key that I tell students is learn how to tell a story. I learned this from Don Hewitt. Tell Me a Story was the name of a book he wrote. And I think mentorship is so important. And I have like a family of kids I mentor, of, white, black, all sorts of, women. And it's called passing it on. And I'm a big believer in passing it on and teaching people how to tell a story. A story will get people outraged if told properly. And we can't just do tweets and things like that. That's not going to cause outrage. What's going to cause outrage is if you tell a story properly and there's an emotional impact at the end of it, people will change, policies will change something. And that is such a key thing. And that's something that I try to pass on.
April, do you tell young students to get involved?
I'm sorry. It's also important to take the focus off of celebrity journalism. Probably 1% of the working journalists in America are people that you know, and the celebrity kind of names that you follow on social media or you see on your nightly news. People don't get into journalists to make a big check. You get into journalists to make a big difference, and it is grueling work, and it is not you're very not likely to become a celebrity doing it. You're doing it for mission. You're doing it for mission. You have to believe that truth needs facilitators to be exposed. That power will hide truth if it has an opportunity to do so. And there has to be someone who digs it out and brings it into the light. And that is grueling work. Sometimes it is grunt work. Sometimes you don't make a lot of money. You may never make it to the New York Times or to the networks or the CNN, but it is still valuable work to do. And if you think about it that way, and not how can I get to be the name that's on Twitter with 1 million followers, then you're at least starting on the right track.
April, really quickly, do you tell them that it's still worth it?
After what I've been through, I give them the good, the bad, and the ugly, the truth. Because right now, we are considered, to some extent, and to some communities, the enemy of the people. We didn't sign up for this. But I do tell them, going back to something that Charles Blow just said, that the founding fathers put into the pillars of this nation the First Amendment for accountability. And as a reporter, that is one of the greatest feelings. Just like the former producer over at 60 Minutes said, you know, if you tell a story right, there will be changes in the administration. Policies, laws can be changed because you are placing a blaring light on inadequacies or dysfunctions. So I give them that, but I also tell them there's the other side, and that other side is real. So I give them all of it and let them weigh it out and see if they want to come. I hate to say some of them might be scared, but they're tough. These millennials will do anything. They will go through fire to get what they want.
Michelle.
So I would say if you don't write your own story, someone's going to write it for you. But more importantly, Ebony is hiring journalists. So if you want to try your wit and write, come and call me. I'll check every LinkedIn post. But in all seriousness, I would say that, you know, the power of writing, of telling your story turns into so many things. I wasn't a journalist, but I wrote books that gave me an opportunity to speak, that set me in line to be a CEO. So telling your story, writing, whether you're a journalist or just using social media responsibly, it's a powerful tool, and you have to hone that if you want to get to where you want to be.
All right, Kat, pretend we're at NABJ and some young blood comes up to you and we're at the Kiki right now. And they're like, I want to be a journalist. What do you tell them?
I tell them a blend of what both just Michelle and April said. You know, I tell them the good and the bad, but I tell them about the legacy of Black journalists and Black journalism, and the fact that we are carrying that torch that Ida B. Wells carried. We are carrying the torch of Robert S. Abbott, who started the Chicago Defender. So it is so important for us to be in these spaces, to be in Black-owned newsrooms as well. And I just let them know that, yes, you are going to have days where you feel like you want to quit, but I always remember the fact that my community, speaking about Detroit specifically, they need us, and they need us to be telling these stories.
No, we both know the struggle together as well at some places. At the end of the day.
Maybe I'm in the minority on this, and I'm glad that you started with the fact that you know my struggle, because I don't want my answer to seem like a reflection of an easy path. I have had my ass kicked. I have been in the trenches. I have done the grueling work. I have done it all. And this is the most fun job in the world. And it's a job with purpose. I mean, how many people's jobs are protected in the First Amendment of the Constitution? And how many people can say that they are a pillar of democracy with the work that they do? So I've never wanted to do anything else. And you know, I promised myself when I was 22, the first time I was in a working newsroom, that when it stops feeling like magic, I'm going to stop doing it. And it has never stopped feeling like magic. So, I mean, I'm the cheerleader. I'm the one you send people to when they want to give up, because I think this is the greatest adventure in the world.
It really is. Kurt, can you weigh in?
Yeah, I would tell anyone that be a local journalist. You know, the things that are going on in our own backyards, in our own communities, in our counties, in our cities, in our towns, those stories oftentimes go unheard, unspoken, unnoticed, and that's where we need as many resources as possible to tell those stories right now. There hasn't ever been a more important time to have who I believe are the guardians of our democracy right now, our journalists, to have as many talented and dedicated and passionate people doing that job as we could possibly get. But we need it at all levels, not just at the national level, not just at, you know, the shiny CNN, ABC, New York Times. We need it at the Bakersfield Californian, or the Fresno Bee, or the Daily Courier. This, you know, local news has been under siege and getting smaller and smaller, and that is a detrimental effect that trickles down specifically to communities of color.
Yeah, and we didn't get to get into it, but I really wanted to get into local newspaper and the lack of local newspapers, how they've been dwindling, especially Black and brown newspapers, because those are really the foot on the ground there, folks who are exposing many of these stories. So let's bookend it with my friend Cheryl. We've been to parts of the Bronx where you speak with young kids every day, and they look up to you, they idolize you, they know you more than anybody else in this city. What do you tell them?
Thank you, Candace. You've done a wonderful job, and my special thanks to Reverend Sharpton and Rachel for making this happen. I have a deep respect for all of my colleagues on this panel. It was an honor and a privilege. And I just want to say, I talk to, as you said, Candace, students of all ages, and I tell them to get into this business, be fearless. That is key. for me. I have walked in both Trade Center attacks in '93, as well as the horrific events of 2001, Hurricane Sandy, and every kind of storm you can imagine. And now we're in a different kind of storm, a pandemic and racial violence. And I am down, but I am not out. It is a lot. We had a president who degraded every journalist on this panel, and we are all still standing. So you have to put on your boots, and as my grandma used to say, put on the whole armor and move forward, because you are not reporting for yourself, you're reporting for the people. And don't forget the people in everything you do. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Amen. Thank you guys so much. We finished on time. It definitely was an honor and a pleasure and privilege to be a part of this panel. Such an honor. So a couple of notes. Ebony's hiring. So if y'all know anybody who did a job.
Some people. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Exactly. That's one of the great things. All right, guys. Kurt, Charles, Dr. Chavis, Michelle, Ira, April, Mara, Kat, Cheryl, thank you guys all. And thank you, Dr. Reverend Al, as well as Rachel and Amaris at Mercury. Thank you guys. Thank you for being here.
Right, bye.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys.
Let's give it up again for that amazing panel. Let's give it up one more time again for that amazing panel. A conversation around media and civil rights. I also want to give a special shout out to Rachel Norlinger for coordinating that. I call her the PR queen. I honor her leadership and all that she does. Thank you so much again. And thank you to Candace Gibson for moderating that conversation.